Well, it's time to pick ourselves up by the bootstraps and look forward. But before we look completely forward, Sunil and I have to talk a little bit about the game. Last night, as heartbreaking as it was, and then we will end on looking forward as we head into this offseason, a pivotal offseason for the San Francisco 49ers. Man, it's still hard 24 hours later, but things are getting a little bit easier. Hopefully, you all are doing great out there, have had some time to process it, and can think about this without a lot of emotion being involved. We'll see. We'll see how the chat is tonight. But we're going to talk about all of it plus more. All right. Welcome back to Last Second Sports. We are giving you our take down to the last second. And I got my guy, So Real, Sunil in the building. What's up, Sunil?
Man, we could have used some defense in those last seconds last night, but man, obviously wish we were here celebrating instead of doing the same thing we did last offseason about trying to figure out what's next. But ultimately, it was an exciting game and brutal way to lose. Brutal way to lose.
Yeah, it definitely was, man. Mike says Brock Purdy's PFF grade was promising. The kid's a baller. We got a franchise quarterback. We're going to talk about Brock. We're going to talk about him. We're going to talk about the future of the team. But first, let's look back on the game yesterday. And, I'll say this, Sunil. I don't want a lot of revisionist history as far as how I felt in the moment. I was pretty clear about how I thought about that game last night after it had happened. But there are definitely some things that have come out in hindsight that makes me a little bit frustrated with this team. And we're going to go through some of them. But one of them is the preparation. And there were two things that stood out to me preparation wise that got me a little bit fired up. The first one was the overtime rules. Now, I personally thought the 49ers should have deferred, knowing what the overtime rule was in the playoffs. Kyle, I understood his explanation was, hey, I wanted the ball third, which means if both teams had scored touchdowns or field goals or what have you, then scoring on that third drive, we would have won the game. So I understood that to a certain extent. But then it came out that Eric Armstead said that he didn't know the overtime rule until it showed it on the Jumbotron in the game during the commercial. Kyle Juszczyk says, well, I thought it was just regular overtime. We score a touchdown, we win. That's why we took the ball first. That's why I thought we took the ball first. And Brock Purdy came out and said, yeah, I didn't expect the Chiefs to play that much man. We weren't really prepared for that. The Chiefs were top 10 in man coverage this year as far as how often they played it. They were number 2 in EPA, which means they were the second most efficient team when it came to playing man coverage, on top of being top 10 as far as how often they played it. And the quarterback wasn't prepared for them to play that much man coverage. Those things were very frustrating to hear. Kansas City, on the other side of things, Chris Jones came out and said, oh, not only were we prepared and knew the overtime rule, we had a whole game plan. If they had scored a touchdown, we had a 2-point play called to try to win the game right then and there. We didn't want a third possession. We had a whole game plan ready for this moment. And that to me is the difference. This is a Super Bowl winning team. They've been there multiple times. They had, to me, crossed every T and dotted every I. Looking back, based off of how the game played out and knowing what has come out since then, do you feel like the 49ers preparation was a bit flawed and maybe they were underprepared for this Super Bowl?
I mean, looking back or seeing the reactions to everything, I think everybody's everybody's bias is going to be what ends up being what their reaction is. If people thought that Kyle Shanahan is the problem, Kyle Shanahan is not detail oriented or is yada yada yada. Kyle Shanahan is going to be what people continue to blame, and it's shown. The people that continuously think Kyle Shanahan is the problem, they feel like, hey, they're vindicated by the results of this game. People that think Brock Purdy is the problem, they feel like they're vindicated by this game because obviously, ultimately, they didn't win, and everybody's looking for a scapegoat when it comes to that, or being critical because obviously everybody wants this team to win. I feel everybody I think feels like they were good enough to win and it didn't happen. So it's like, who do you blame? One, with the OT rules, it's weird that players don't know the rules when the coach knows the rules clearly because he has a strategy about that. But not knowing the rules, I don't know if that mattered about whether or not they would have won in those situations or not. Ultimately, they all knew they needed to score a touchdown, and they knew they needed to stop, Kansas City from scoring. They didn't do either of those things. So I don't, like I said, it's going to play into the bias of if you think Kyle Shanahan isn't a good coach or can't win a Super Bowl, you're going to use that in your defense. To me, Jesse, I think they were prepared, and this is the reason why. They went the first half of that game. I was getting nothing but text messages from people that are unbiased that were just like, you guys are so much better than the Kansas City Chiefs. Like, it was dominant. The announcers were saying it. People could see it. You had Travis Kelce, like almost like running into Coach Reed, frustrated. You had
Chris Jones firing up the defense on the sideline, getting in them.
Patrick Mahomes they were shook. They were shook. And unfortunately, even though the 49ers offense was still able to move the ball down and all of that, there was unforced errors or maybe even forced errors. I don't know. But, from two of the best players in the game that the 49ers have that you just don't expect to happen. You don't expect to have CMC fumble the ball when you're that close to the end zone. You don't expect Trent Williams to have two back-to-back, penalties that pretty much are drive killers for you. If those two things didn't happen, you're looking at a score at halftime of potentially, 20-3 versus 10-3. And then ultimately it's a whole nother game. Obviously, the missed extra point from Moody played a pivotal role because now all of a sudden that stop at the end of the quarter, stopping them from scoring a touchdown, you win the game instead of, it being tied and going into overtime. So the team wasn't good enough. They didn't execute good enough. Ultimately Andy Reid showed why he's the best coach in the league in my eyes with the play calling at the end of the game. And, in that overtime, that play call to call Mahomes' number to run it. Obviously that was, a backbreaker. So ultimately they got out coached at the end of the game, out executed at the end of the game. And whether you want to blame that on preparation or execution, I don't know. But to me, the team came out ready to win this game. Obviously losing Dre Greenlaw, I think that plays a big role in Travis Kelce's second half. I don't think if Dre Greenlaw was there, Kelce gets off, and, they obviously took advantage of Oren Burks and, it played a pivotal role. But I thought that the 49ers had this game won until the special teams issue where that it ended up being a fumble, a turnover, they score. But ultimately, to me, I wouldn't blame it on preparation, Jesse. I know that's going to be some people's, scapegoat and because of the comments that came out and all this. Ultimately, Patrick Mahomes is the best quarterback in the league, potentially the best quarterback ever. He's shown it time after time. I think Andy Reid is going to go down as the greatest coach ever. And, Kyle Shanahan isn't that yet. Brock Purdy isn't that yet. And this team ultimately didn't execute the way that they needed to. And they've been able to overcome because they've had the talent. They've had the room for error because their talent has been able to overcome maybe mistakes that they made with not scoring or not playing strong defense and all that kind of stuff in previous games. In this game against that tandem, their margin of error wasn't as big as it needed to be because they just made too many mistakes.
I do like the one thing that I really like that you said, and I said this last night as well, and I still believe this. The 49ers, I believe, are the more talented team, but the Chiefs are the better team. They know how to win in these moments. They had the quarterback, they had the coach, and they just had too many chances. So for me, I think that they are the better team. The overtime rule was a little weird that the players didn't know it. I think that does give an insight to maybe some of the preparation stuff. Really, to me, the preparation thing that does concern me is that whatever your game plan was built around, when your quarterback who has to know the game plan the most out of everybody offensively outside of the head coach was a little bit taken back by the amount of man coverage that he saw. I don't know, man. That one to me is kind of inexcusable. Not saying that's why they lost. I just think all of these little things add up and kind of give a peek behind the curtain and give you just enough to show that there are levels to this. There is a reason that the Kansas City Chiefs today are back-to-back Super Bowl champions. We saw a peek behind the curtain to the Philadelphia Eagles this year, and maybe can understand how they were a little bit underprepared for last year's Super Bowl, as great as they played. And the 49ers played great as well. They had a chance to win this game multiple times, but there's just little execution differences, whether that be through the week or two of game planning or the game itself. And those differences always seem to go Kansas City's way. And I don't think that's a coincidence. I think that they are just making sure that they are turning over every stone. Question I have for you, you talked about Kyle Shanahan a little bit and, people's narratives, what have you. Kyle Shanahan now, there are the 49ers, in the Super Bowl history of teams that have trailed by at least 10 points at any point in the Super Bowl game are 7-49 overall. 3 of those 7 wins have come against Shanahan coach teams, regardless of the capacity he was a coach. Obviously, one of them we know was in Atlanta, 2 of them now in San Francisco. Kind of worst case scenario, I would say, for Kyle Shanahan. We talked about this, we jokingly talked about it, thinking there's no way it could happen again. A 10-point lead is like the worst thing that could have happened. And it happened, and they lost it again, albeit this one was much earlier, right? This wasn't like they were going into the fourth quarter with a 10-point lead, but it was a 10-point lead nonetheless. It goes into the statistics in a bad way for Kyle Shanahan. What are your thoughts overall about Kyle Shanahan?
Yeah, I mean, it's easy to just look at the stats and not look at who he played against in those games.
For sure.
There's 2 people that are thought about as the GOATs in this game, or potentially the GOATs. And those are the quarterbacks he went up against, right? He went up, and there's 2 of the greatest coaches of all time that people talk about are the 2 coaches that he went against in those situations as well. So, yeah, I mean, look, once again, I think it goes back to, if you don't like Kyle Shanahan, if you think he's not good enough, you're going to use these stats, you're going to use these games and say he's not good enough, right? But when you look at where he is this early in his coaching career, Jesse, and you compare it to those great coaches like Andy Reid and like Bill Belichick, he's outshining them by leaps and bounds as far as how quick he's been able to do what he's able to do as well. And then you look at Andy Reid, all of the criticism that Kyle Shanahan is getting is the same stuff that Andy Reid was getting when he was in with the Eagles. He can't win the big game. He can't overcome the hump. He's bad at, game management. He can't get his team, to play in these big games. He's a choke artist, so on and so forth. Eagles ended up going and, firing him. And Now look at the results, right? The Eagles did get a Super Bowl after that, but Andy Reid has 3 Super Bowls in a dynasty, right? So to me, I know I'm a Shanahan. I like Kyle Shanahan. I think this is the best this 49ers team has looked since the heyday when we were winning championships. This is the closest that I've ever felt that the 49ers could get to winning a Super Bowl since the 49ers were winning a Super Bowl with Steve Young. And to me, I look at this game and throughout it, I felt like we were the better team. But ultimately, all the superstars that we have made plays that just were uncharacteristic. Even Fred Warner getting burnt on plays and so on and so forth. And yeah, ultimately the buck stops with the coach. So I understand he's going to get a lot of criticism, but I just think that people just think that anybody could do what he's been able to do. Anybody could bring this team to where it was based off of where he started with. And ultimately, I just don't agree with that. And I don't think there's a quick fix. I don't think there's somebody out there that's going to be able to do better than what Kyle Shanahan is. I heard with all those things you did talk about, I also heard a bunch of players talking about how much they love Kyle Shanahan, how much they love playing for him. And we know the culture that has been created here. We know how many players from other that are former 49ers that came back during this playoff run and all that kind of stuff. That's not normal. You don't see that, especially in organizations where there's not where they haven't won a bunch of championships with that team. They're still coming because they love the culture. They love, playing here and what that means. To me, that's building the foundation. But unfortunately, like you said, it didn't happen again. 0-2 in Super Bowls. And until he wins until he wins one, the critics are still going to criticize. And I understand that.
Yeah, I think the most important thing that you said was the critics are going to criticize and you understand it. Like you're not saying he's above reproach, he's above criticism. What you're
No.
saying is that you feel like there's not a better option. And there's certainly, I'll say this, there's no guaranteed option. Okay. And right now, looking at it, firing Kyle Shanahan today, what are your options? Sure, probably what? Bill Belichick, Pete Carroll, all the good young coaches have been hired. So you're going to get a major retread of guys that are probably a little washed up as coaches and aren't necessarily going to get you over the hump. For me, when you raise a problem, you kind of have to have a solution. I don't know what the solution would be right now. I will say this, though. You know me, I'm all about holding Kyle Shanahan accountable. And I think he has improved in some areas this year. You talked about that culture. Well, topic number 3, I got an issue with some of those things in that culture. Some of the things that are allowed to happen with this team. It's a bit frustrating. And, the one thing that frustrates me probably more than anything, that the excuse that people give with Kyle Shanahan is that, oh, well, half the league runs his scheme. Okay. So you've pigeonholed half the league. You got half the league that has a chance, that runs your scheme, that can go win a Super Bowl. Yet not one of your guys has won a Super Bowl. The only guy that did was McVay, and he's your dad's guy. He's not your guy. And he abandoned the scheme. He went away from a run-heavy scheme, turned it into a pass-heavy scheme and a 3-wide receiver scheme. So if it's so great, why aren't these guys winning? Yeah, they make it to the playoffs. That's awesome. They're not winning Super Bowls. So for me, again, not saying fire Kyle, but this whole, oh, his scheme's so great and everybody's hiring his guys. They ain't winning. They're not. So until at least one of them wins, that's not a feather in his cap, in my opinion. It's just not. So I don't know. We'll see how this goes. But I agree. Can't fire Kyle because I don't know the solution. But I definitely think he deserves a lot of heat right now. A lot of heat.
Yeah, I mean, I think you always say context matters.
Mm-hmm.
And there's a lot of great players that didn't win a chip because Michael Jordan was around. There's a lot of great players that didn't win a chip because Shaq and Kobe or Kobe Bryant was around. LeBron doesn't have as many chips as he possibly could have because of the Warriors and what they did. when you look at who Kyle Shanahan is losing to, you're looking at potentially the greatest quarterback, greatest coach duo in history. Now, if somebody's like, oh, well, we need somebody that could overcome that. All right, cool. But if your name isn't Tom Brady at quarterback, there's nobody that's been beating Patrick Mahomes and Andy Reid in the Super Bowl, right? They've won 3 out of the last 4. I mean, there's a lot of people trying to figure out how to beat that team. And I think if you look at it, Kyle Shanahan, I think can figure it out. That's just my belief based off of what has done. I understand. I mean, if people think that people believe he can't do it, all right, I would just say, show me somebody that can, or what is he doing wrong? What did he do wrong yesterday that another coach would have done differently? Tell me that, because I ultimately think that the game plan was perfect. It was working. And I don't know. They just ultimately, if you don't execute, if you're not damn near perfect against the Kansas City Chiefs, they're going to win. And that's kind of ultimately what happened.
Yeah, I think there's a couple things, right? When I look at CMC and his fumble, uncharacteristic. One of the takeaways I had in the first quarter was the biggest stars made the biggest mistakes, which was not characteristic. And it's not Kyle Shanahan's fault, right? He didn't fumble the ball. He didn't jump and have a false start or hold the way that Trent Williams did on back-to-back plays. That killed 2 drives. I think the one thing that people are going to point to as far as what he could have done better, starting the second half with 9 out of 10 plays were passes. I don't think he ran until play number 7, something like that. I think that's what people are going to look at a little bit frustrated, because that's how they were moving the ball was on the ground, obviously through the air for sure. But a lot of that was because they were doing well on the ground and then building off of that. I think that's what people are going to look at most. I don't necessarily look at that sequence and say that's the reason that the 49ers lost. I think there are a lot of reasons the 49ers lost, including the other things that I mentioned. Obviously, we can talk about some questionable defensive calls in overtime and the final drive into regulation. I think we can talk about just some other mental mistakes that happened throughout that game. The Moody missed extra point. There's a lot of little things I can point to. To me, ultimately, it was a team loss. I don't fully blame Shanahan, but I just think that there are still reasons to be frustrated with Shanahan. There's more to be desired. It just is.
Yeah. And if you don't end up winning the last game of the season in the Super Bowl, everybody has to look at themselves and say where they could get better. But I think there's a difference between saying, hey, we have the right guy, we just need him to get better, versus saying he can never do it, get rid of him. And I think that's where I'm coming from, is like, I think Kyle Shanahan is the right guy. He needs to get better. Obviously, if he was exactly who he needs to be, we'd have a Super Bowl right now. We don't. So where do those changes need to be? I would rather ride out with Kyle Shanahan than think that the solution is elsewhere. I know there's people, I see a lot of them in the chat right now saying that, oh, he's just not the right guy, throw him to the wayside. It's like, all right, cool. Well, for who? And who's better? And when has the team where has the team like failed other than not winning the big game? Like, what is it about? What would coaching have done different, I guess, in my mind? So that's how I feel.
Let me ask you this, and this is something that Grant brought up last year that I remember. Right now, you have a choice. You can either roll with Kyle, or you can say, hey, we're not going to give you any control of this roster, Bill Belichick, but as far as who can come on the team, but we're going to let you coach this team for 1 year and see if you can get it done. And we'll evaluate you after the year. Maybe we go a different direction. But a part of that means you're trading Kyle somewhere for 2 first-round picks. So you get 2 first-round picks for Kyle, and you get Bill Belichick for a year. Would you rather do that, or would you rather? This is a total hypothetical, and I love it. Or would you rather keep Kyle Shanahan?
I would keep Kyle because Bill Belichick hasn't shown to really be able to do anything without Tom Brady. Like what has his success been outside of Tom Brady being the quarterback? I think the defense would be awesome. Right, with Bill Belichick, he obviously has been able to keep really consistent defenses. But in my mind, I think the game, especially the offensive side of things. I mean, the decisions that Bill Belichick has made with the Patriots, making Matt Patricia offensive coordinator, if that was happening with the 49ers, with this fan base, after like killing Kyle Shanahan the way that they kill him, there's no way they would have let Bill Belichick get away with that type of stuff. So, I mean, the 2 first rounds I think are appealing, Jesse, obviously, because I think definitely along this offensive line, those first round picks would be nice. But ultimately, I think people like blaming Kyle Shanahan for everything without giving him credit for how much he has done for this team. And like I said, I think he's the right guy. I just think, he needs to get better. But I think it's marginally. I don't think it's just I don't think he's that far away. Let's just put it that way.
All right, let's get through some of these super chats. There's a ton of them. So I'm going to try to rapid fire through them as much as possible, but also be respectful of the point that you donated money. Beats and Meats says, after Greenlaw's injury, Burks came in. Burks targeted 9 times, 9 receptions, given up with 1 TD. Yeah, I mean, that was a huge loss. The thing is, though, is that Chiefs had a ton of injuries to good players. Now, it is different. I will say it is different knowing you're not going to have those players and preparing 2 weeks off, knowing you're not going to have them versus losing someone mid-game. But, man, they have to overcome. They had to overcome. There were some really good players that the Chiefs were missing. But Greenlaw, I'm just gutted for Greenlaw, the person, because, man, I really think he does things the right way. I think he's a leader on this team. And I'm not only thinking about the Super Bowl, which sucks he didn't get to play in the whole second half because of that injury, and that tore him apart. But then you're looking at next season, and how long does it take for him to get back, if it happens at all next year? So there's a lot of things. Brother, really, Kyle Bob says Kyle's an idiot. It's that damn simple. He's a moron. All right. I can see you and Sunil are going to have fun tonight. Ramon says O-line did no favors for Brock yesterday. Yeah, I don't disagree with that one, man. That is something that they've got to get under wraps for sure. Dave Barclay says, Jesse, can I buy you a meal? Well, I think you just did, brother. I appreciate you. Why empty backfield on 18 plays? Why did we stop running? Why does our defense give up big plays? CMC should have ran more. We should have deferred in overtime. Moment seemed too big for Kyle yet again. Fire Kyle, fire Kyle. I would have to know how many of those plays of the 18 or so were third down, because third down is an obvious passing down, or were after a big penalty, when you're 2nd and 18 or what have you. These are kind of obvious passing downs. I'm not saying that there's no truth to what you're saying here, Dave, but for me, I would, instead of the raw numbers, I'm curious to see how many of those were in run/pass downs. And I agree. If you are going empty backfield on downs and distances where it could be a run play, I think that you're kind of hurting your team, at least from an element of surprise. You're giving them the obvious answers, can make it a little bit harder. But sometimes your quarterback can prefer that as well. Maybe he sees the field better. Maybe he went to Kyle and said, hey, I'm seeing the field a lot better when we're going 5 wide. I don't know. I think there's a lot of questions there around those 18 plays. As far as stop running, that sequence to start the second half is definitely a head scratcher for sure. The deferring in overtime, I think he gave his reasoning. I don't agree with it necessarily, but I'm not going to kill him for that personally, because at least he had a reason as to why he did it. It seemed like some of the players had no idea what was going on. Maybe Kyle, after the fact, had a reason and also didn't know what was going on. I don't know, but I'm going to assume that he had a plan. And regardless of whether I agree with it or not, he stuck with it. And I also want to say this again, I don't want to be a Johnny come lately with my opinions. In the moment, said that I wouldn't have gone for it on that fourth down. And that fourth down, going for it, they got it, and that resulted in a touchdown. So based off of my decision making in that time, I would have taken 3. Would my team have lost earlier and not even made it to overtime because I chose to take the 3? I don't know. Things could have been different, but some things he did that I didn't agree with clearly worked out for the 49ers. So, it's just there's a lot of things that you can question for sure.
I think another thing where context matters when it comes to deferring in the overtime, or taking the ball in overtime. The defense, he might have been reading his defense and saying, "Yo, these guys are gassed. The Kansas City Chiefs just led a long drive down to tie the game, right?" So maybe he didn't want to just put them back out there, as well as his wanting the ball third time down. But yeah, I mean, look, everybody's the best coach the next day, right? Everybody would have made the right decisions. Everybody would have, made the right play. Everybody would have called the right thing. CMC ran the ball, 21, 22 times. What, you want him to run it 30 times? Yeah, I mean, like, it's, that's what I'm saying. It's like, yeah, you can put up these stats with no context, but if CMC is running the ball 22 times, usually that's a pretty good sign that they're running the ball well. They're sticking with the run. So I think it's easy to nitpick stuff that, because the game wasn't won. If once again, it's an if they were up 4 instead of 3 on that last drive and they were able to make the stop that they made, are we still nitpicking that? Are we still saying that Kyle Shanahan is a moron? Kyle Shanahan is this, Kyle Shanahan is that? I don't know. We'll see. Maybe. Brother Bob has been pretty consistent that Kyle Shanahan is a moron, so I think he would continue to say it. But
at least he's consistent, right?
Yeah, he's consistent with it. But I just think it's easy. It's easy to just look at it and be like, he's not the one, right? They said it with the Eagles. Andy Reid wasn't the one. Pretty sure they'd rather have what Andy Reid has in Kansas City than what they have in Philadelphia right now. So to me, I just think it's easy to say the grass is always greener. Ultimately, I think that this team has been built the right way. This is a team I love cheering for, and I do think they will get over the hump with this coach.
Okay, I like it. I like your optimism. We can use it. Dave Barclay says, and I agree with Brother Bob yet again. I highlighted this comment as well because he said he wanted to start a channel, and I just wanted to let you know that my DMs are open on Twitter. My email is in the description of the channel. If you have any questions, brother, reach out. I would be more than happy to help. So I just wanted to throw that out there to you. And Brother Bob says, how do you not know the rules or tendencies? I get it, Brother Bob. Dave Barclay says, exactly. How do you not know the rules? They're feeding off each other. Brother Bob says, Kyle Shanahan didn't know. He lied because his team would have known. That's what I'm saying. I think that there might be something to that, Brother Bob. I'm not going to outright call him a liar. He made it seem like he knew, but it is weird that his team clearly did not know. So that one, at least his message didn't trickle down. Real OBJ says Kyle needs to give Purdy more freedom. Let him change the protections and call his own shots pre-snap. He will mature and improve, but he needs a new right side of the O-line. McKivitz really needs to go. Whew. Brother Bob says Kyle Shanahan equals idiot because he refused to scout Mahomes. What the F? I want to say something about this real quick. I don't necessarily want to get into that whole thing, but I was trying to think of the 49ers season as kind of a storybook and how everything lined up for them to write the perfect story, getting back to the Super Bowl, playing the same team that they had lost to before, getting that revenge. What a great story it would have been. And what I didn't realize is that the story was actually about the Kansas City Chiefs. And as Mahomes and his story is being written, he can look at a team like the San Francisco 49ers and be like, yeah, you did have a chance to get me. You didn't get me. And now you're going to pay for it every chance that you get. Much like Aaron Rodgers tried to make the 49ers pay for it, and it just never worked out in his favor. but Mahomes certainly has made them pay. Brother Bob says the only thing Head said is that it is true he was outcoached.
Yep, this culture is terrible, Brother Bob. You're right. This roster is trash. It's a shock that they're able to get to this many NFC championships. You're right, man. It's because they run themselves. Has nothing to do with Kyle Shanahan.
Cryptic says you got asked the question, 2 turnovers on the last drive. Who do you want? Oh yeah, you're right. This was up all last week. All right, 2 timeouts on the last drive. Who do you want with the ball in their hands, Mahomes or Purdy? Mahomes got it twice. As far as overtime, I don't mind the decision. We drove down the field and Jones went unblocked. Yeah, I did get asked the question, and that exact scenario happened essentially twice, and I was terrified both times. And once he didn't score a touchdown the first time, as soon as the 49ers didn't score a touchdown, I looked at my wife and I said, this game's over. She's like, what do you mean? They're up 3. And I said, this game is over. Patrick Mahomes is not going to take a second chance and not score a touchdown, especially knowing he gets 4 plays to get a first down. It was over at that point. I knew it. Brother Bob says, sad reading that Reed was mocking Kyle Shanahan's intelligence of the rules. I highlighted this comment because he was in the chat all week talking as ish, and he was right. And so I figured I would give you the shine that you deserve. Congratulations to the Chiefs. They are Super Bowl champions. And Brother Bob says, okay, so it took Reed 20 years and a team change. Guess that means how many more years we have to wait for Kyle. I guess we can ignore the team change part.
He also had a lot more success earlier than Andy Reid is what I was trying to say. So, and I was just trying to point to the fact that just changing the coach, cool. That I like I said, would the Philadelphia Eagles rather have Andy Reid right now, the way he's built, or would they rather have what they have right now? I don't know. Brother Bob, maybe you'd rather have Nick Sirianni and what's going on over there at the Eagles versus what Andy Reid has with the Chiefs. So I think you just continue to let the guy figure it out. Coaching is not easy. He's very, very close. There's a lot of, and I guarantee you right now, there's a lot of teams right now that would fire their coach to have Kyle Shanahan there right now. And, a lot of the 49er fan base wants to just get rid of him. And I'm like, that's cool. I know Eagles fans that wish they never made that move and got rid of Andy Reid.
Yeah, I'm sure. Loyalty says Andy Reid was a loser in big games for 18 years with the Eagles and Chiefs until he got Mahomes. Without Mahomes era, Kyle has more success in a shorter time than Reid. Kind of to your point, great players like Mahomes rise above coaching. Yeah, I mean, we can look at the Andy Reid thing. The thing is Andy Reid, for the most part, didn't really have losing seasons ever. His teams had multiple quarterbacks and were successful in those scenarios. And the Mahomes thing wasn't luck. Remember, they traded up. There was rumor, and not just rumor, the Saints basically came out and said they were getting ready to draft Patrick Mahomes at their pick. And the Chiefs were like, oh, really? Okay, well, we're going to go ahead and trade up and get 1 pick in front of you and draft Mahomes. That didn't happen by happenstance. They made that happen. And then you had Reid go and learn his offense to make him more comfortable and adjust his play calling to fit Mahomes early on to get him involved and get him ready to play. So not that you're saying this, Loyal, but that happened because of Andy Reid and the way that he decided to go about picking Mahomes and coaching Patrick Mahomes. So it certainly wasn't luck. Dave says, Jesse's on point right now. I don't even know what part you're talking about. That was a while ago. Brother Bob says, maybe learn the rules and teach the players and not get drunk. Ooh, okay. I'm going to go through a couple more of these and then we'll get to our next topic. Dave Barclay says, once again, agree with Brother Bob. And then Brother Bob says, didn't Todd Bowles' defense beat Reid and Mahomes?
Yeah. The defense was there, but they also had this guy named Tom Brady that was the quarterback. So I don't know if he played a role, Brother Bob, but yeah, it was Todd Bowles probably. But if Kyle Shanahan was the offensive
Well,
coordinator,
and four offensive linemen were out, four starting offensive linemen. I think that's a pretty big deal. Coach G says Kyle needs an OC to help him manage situations. I will say this: I think I don't know that he needs a full OC, but he definitely needs somebody that can kind of be quality control, and not like Grant's quality control. I mean, like actual quality control on the field to help him in these decisions. Play somewhere that he trusts. Dave Barclay says, once again, yes, Brother Bob, Bucks beat Mahomes. Brother Bob says, didn't idiot Kyle pass on Brady for Jimmy? He did, but he tried to bring him back this year instead of playing Purdy. So if that makes you feel better. All right. That being said, there's still like 20 something of these things, and we got to get to the next topic. So we're going to do that. All right. Let's talk about the next topic. This one really is kind of me more selfishly wanting to bring this up because, man, I've seen a lot of, for lack of better words, crying on the timeline today about the refs. And I just think it's Bush League, man. I looked at that game, and I think it's very easy to go back and still frame play after play after play and be like, look, there was a holding here, or there was this here, or this false start here, or whatever you want to do. I can tell you when I watched the game live that there were multiple times that McKivitz kind of did the Lane Johnson jump off early. Same thing that we hate. We didn't have a problem with it last night. I can tell you that there were multiple spots that the Chiefs were kind of given the raw deal on. One of them killed a drive. I think on the third and the fourth down, I believe, when they were pinned in their own territory, I thought that they had gotten a first down, or excuse me, the second and the third down, 2 plays in a row, and they weren't given it, and they decided to punt. The point is that I think if you still frame everything and you go play by play, you can do the same thing for the Chiefs that people are doing for the 49ers. Fan how you want. I'm not trying to gatekeep. If you want to blame the refs and that helps you get through things, by all means. I just think that that's a really bad way of looking at it. That's something that I did when I was a kid. And I don't think that you ever can truly process and get over a game if that's how you're going to attack it. I think it'll always eat you up. And if you think 1 or 2 bad calls are the reason that the 49ers lost, I just think that that's the wrong way to look at it. So for me, I just wanted to call this out. I want to get your thoughts on it. Do you think the refs were bad last night? Do you think that the refs are the reason that the 49ers lost that game?
No, it had nothing to do with the refs. I mean, if the refs were bad, they were equally bad for both teams. I mean, there was, I think on the halftime show, they were talking about how Brendel wasn't called for a flag for, down the field on the Juwan Jennings touchdown pass where he threw it to CMC. And that was a missed call that obviously would have taken points off the board, which didn't go in Kansas City's way. So this wasn't the refs. This was obviously the refs had nothing to do with the CMC fumble. The ref had nothing to do, with, the ball going off of a 49er on a punt and it turning the ball over. Obviously there was calls, but I think there was blatant calls on both sides.
Yeah, I think so too. To me, it was super frustrating to see that today. My gosh, guys, come on, man. Like we can't do this. And the frustrating thing is that a lot of people talked about it going into the game. Like that, they already had the crutch there. And then once they saw the confirmation that they were looking for, it's like, oh, that's why we lost. I told you this was going to happen. Okay, man. I guess that we lost because of the refs. Enjoy your offseason. I just feel like you're going to have a really long, crappy offseason if you think the refs are the reason that the 49ers lost that game.
For sure.
Cryptic says, don't like Wilkes all-out blitz on third downs. Can we talk about this? Talk about Kyle's decision-making. One thing that we talked about in the Minnesota Vikings game was that blitz. And I remember saying that Kyle Shanahan had a moment in the headset, could have called a timeout, or could have talked Wilkes out of calling that play and called something different. That is as much on him as it is on Wilkes. One thing I do want to say is we talk about learning from your mistakes and improving. Kyle didn't like what they were about to call, and he clearly got in the headset and made Wilkes change a play. I think he even called the timeout. That was a little bit encouraging to see. Like, hey, you're actually listening. You're not preparing for your offense. You're listening to the play that's being called, and you're being a head coach right now. You're stopping it and you're changing it to what you want to see. And ultimately, the decision came down to him, which I have no issue with. I actually think that he deserves a little bit of credit for that, because I personally killed him for talking the way that he did about Wilkes after that call, knowing that he could have changed the play and decided not to do it. And then later on, he was like, yeah, well, ultimately, I could have changed the call and I didn't. This time he did. So I'll give him a little bit of kudos there for that. Carlos says the game plan was working until it didn't. Hashtag Kyle. Moises says, you see Feliciano throwing Burford under the bus on X. I did see that. So for those that didn't see it, somebody had shown a play where it looked like McKivitz blew an assignment. It wasn't McKivitz' assignment. It was Burford. And he responded to it saying that it wasn't McKivitz' assignment. Didn't say whose assignment it was, but we all know that it was Spencer Burford's assignment. So, yeah, that's a little rough to see. Mike Monahan, what's up, Mike? Can Brock call changes and protections? From what I understand, the protections are called by the center. Now, he's responsible for free blitzers off the edge and has to know that those are coming and know what his checkdowns are. When you see him tap his helmet and call can, he basically has multiple plays that he can choose from at the line. Based off of what he's seeing, he can switch to the other play. But to my knowledge of this offense and what he's allowed to do, he can't just all out call his own audible and completely change the play from something that is not given to him through the headset prior. So Dave says, Brother Bob, right again. Daza says, Sunil, what makes you think that he can get better, though? He's lost 3 Super Bowls. It's a good question.
All right. So if as an offensive coordinator, you're going to put that Super Bowl on him, to me, that already kind of shows your bias towards Kyle Shanahan, because are people looking at Steve Wilkes and saying he lost this Super Bowl, or, whatever, like, all those assistant coordinators on those teams that did one, do they get all the credit? So he has lost 2 Super Bowls, right, as the head coach. To me, the reason why I think he could get better is because I think he's consistently got better, right? I think that initially, early on in his career, game management at the end of games was an issue. I think he's done better throughout the team. We've seen changes with that. I think that his ability to keep a defense as good as it has been throughout his career here as the head coach, even though he's had multiple different defensive coordinators, I think is a big reason why that shows a lot about his coaching. I think he's been able to pivot as far as some of his tendencies. A guy like Jesse, who's been super critical of him, has called out a multitude of things of how he's changed and how he's gotten better. So to me, this is his first full year with his guy at quarterback, and they missed the Super Bowl by a fraction. It wasn't like this was a blowout. It wasn't like this wasn't the 49ers didn't have a chance to win this game. They weren't good enough to win this game. They ultimately weren't good enough to win this game in the sense that they didn't execute when they needed to execute. And, the ball bounced in Kansas City's way a couple times. But ultimately, I don't think that they're that far off. So if they're that close, all it's minor tweaks, right? Get the offensive line better. The people that are just like, oh, he abandoned the run and all this kind of stuff. I'm like, well, you wanted him to run the ball 30 times? Like what, instead of 22 times? Is it 27 times? Like what is it that abandoning the run actually means? Like how many times should a CMC have run the ball? There's people that are in the chat saying he holds quarterbacks back. Yet every quarterback that has ever left him has not been able to go on and have the amount of success that they've had with him. And that's been across the board. So ultimately, to me, it's just like, Like I said, I don't think he's perfect. I think he needs to get better. Obviously, he'd be winning the Super Bowl if he was exactly what he needed to do. But to me, I think the biggest difference is, to me, I just think he's closer than he is farther away. And I do think that he eventually will get better based off of how I've seen him grow with this tenure here.
Dave says, ding, 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 Brother Bob, right on all points. Brother Bob says, Kyle won't get better because he's too stubborn, equals problem or probably. Randall says, sign third and Juwan now, and Niners, you have this one fan's forgiveness for breaking my heart. Yeah, man, Juwan Jennings. We're going to talk about that this offseason too. Dave Barclay says, right again, Kyle is his own problem. BB is a winner. Talking about Bill Belichick, I think. Dazza says, are there any players we can trade, or are the cap hits too big? We need to massively upgrade. We're going to talk about that. We're actually going to talk. We're not going to get too deep into it. We will at some point this offseason, but we're going to talk a little bit about it. That's the last topic. So remember that, Dazza. We will answer this question in much more depth. Jay Mella says, Kyle, big blunders. Shanahan. G.O.K. I think I get the pulse of the chat. G.O.K. says, Jesse, does Kyle's dad, Mike, lose this game, or would he have ran it more? Man, I don't know. I don't know. I couldn't tell you, man. Mike was a really good coach. I think Kyle's a good coach, but I couldn't tell you. To me, it's not the amount of runs, it's the timely. And the only gripe that I had, again, live, was starting the second half with 9 out of your first 10 plays were passes. I wasn't a fan of that. Outside of that, I don't remember one spot where I was like, gosh, if they just ran the ball there. Certainly. And that sequence might have been the difference for sure. I don't know. Dazza says Chiefs had 11 quarterback hits. How many went through the right guard and the right tackle? For sure. I will say this. I think it was clear that Patrick Mahomes was running for his life too. That offensive line wasn't doing a great job. He was getting blasted. He was uncomfortable for a big chunk of that game. And ultimately, he's just Patrick frickin' Mahomes. The dude disgusted, or do you mean disguised as another dude? Bang, bang, Niner gang, no 6th for you.
Yet.
All right, fair enough. Yeah, yet. Dazza says Kyle Shanahan was asked if he received because he thought the D was gassed, and Kyle said no. Yeah, I think I didn't see that either. I think his reasoning was more about getting the ball third, thinking that if the game is tied, whoever scores after that does win the game, and he's right. So getting the ball third could be an advantage in that instance, I guess. That was his reasoning. Dave Barclay says, if we are talking ifs, if Moody's kick isn't blocked, we aren't talking about any of this. Kyle sucks. Brother Bob is awesome. Jesse is awesome. Kyle sucks. Fire Kyle. Love Brother Bob. Jesse, fire Kyle. Yeah, here's the thing about that. Situation would have been different. They would have been up 4. But I also think that the Chiefs would have been more aggressive in trying to score a touchdown, and they certainly would have at least had one more play, and they probably would have drawn up 2 very, very good plays to try to score there with the 10 seconds they had, instead of just throwing a fade, which they knew probably wasn't going to work, but they were hoping that maybe Kelsey can make a play. And if he doesn't, we have enough time to run another play. That was the thinking there, versus dialing up your best play in that scenario. So who knows? Maybe they would have lost in regulation because they dialed up their best plays and they score. I don't know. Dave Barclay says, look at their humility. Look at the humility from Jesse. Great man. I appreciate that. I mean, there's just no reason not to give the other team flowers at this point. I know that people get mad. Shoot. I just missed Shady Luke's. Let me see if I can find it real quick. I apologize. I clicked off Shady Luke's. It puts it in a nice little spot for me to grab it too. And once I lose it, I lose it. It's so annoying. Shady Luke, how about do this? Sunil, if you can keep an eye real quick, if Shady Luke sends out a message, don't do another super chat. Just give us a regular chat of what you said. I apologize. Brother Bob says, you make a straw man position. No one said the roster is trash. So again, how many more years? 13? Great. What about the team change? Reed adopted or adapted to?
I mean, once again, you're saying you made a straw man position. Your comments are Kyle Shanahan is a moron. Kyle Shanahan is stubborn. Kyle Shanahan is yada yada yada. You're not saying what Kyle Shanahan could have done different in this game. You said he shouldn't have drank on Monday of the week before. He should have known the rules. Like, none of that is the reasons why they lost. So to me, I don't know what straw man I'm creating. Like, it's hard when all of your attacks are just personal things against Kyle Shanahan. If you gave like tactical things, then okay, cool. But ultimately, I'm saying that there's a lot of good that Kyle Shanahan did. That's why I pointed to the roster build, the culture, all that kind of stuff. So I just don't think he's the moron that you think he is.
Shady Luke, this was his comment, says Kyle Shanahan is smart, but I think Shane Steichen is better. Yeah, maybe. I think Shane Steichen's a hell of a coach. So, all right, before we get back to super chats, I want to talk fair or foul. So, the 49ers lose the Super Bowl. And, of course, players start chirping around the league. Fletcher Cox came right for Debo. Kind of surprising, being the veteran that Fletcher Cox is, coming at Debo the way that he did. I'm not going to necessarily share what he said, but I do want to share what Sauce Gardner said and some of the things that happened. So Sauce Gardner tweeted something along the lines that the 49ers were better on paper, but the Chiefs always find a way. And he kind of knew that. He knew that they were going to win the Super Bowl based off of that, was his opinion. Jair Brown and Charvarius Ward went at Sauce Gardner for the comment. Now, since Charvarius Ward has deleted his tweet, which I personally like that he did do that, but I'll ask you, Sunil, fair or foul? We know the players are going to talk around the league. I guess my question is do you think the 49ers, do you like that the 49ers do this after a loss, or do you take issue with that?
I mean, it's hard to say. Like, is it what I would do? Is it like in my mentality to do that? No, but I do think that you can't, the confidence that these guys have is ultimately what causes them to be the great players that they are, right? And I think Jair Brown, I think Charvarius Ward play with a certain confidence and arrogance that gives that same thing, that if they're getting talked about, they're going to respond back to it. And you see it on the field, right? You see it from guys like Demo, Brandon Ayuk, all these guys, and Debo. And so ultimately it's like, okay, would it be great if necessarily they didn't? Yeah, but ultimately, would I want that? What if that's who they are as people and that's why they play the way that they play? To me, I wouldn't want to change that. So I guess you got to kind of take it. It kind of comes with the meal that you're getting from them. Is part of it is going to be they're that fiery on the field and off the field as well. So yeah, it's not great. It's not a great look, but ultimately, like I said, I like who they are as people. It's not like they're having issues off the field or anything like that. They're just competitive. It's part of their competitive nature that when somebody's talking trash, they're gonna talk trash back. So do I like that? Would I rather them be that competitive? Absolutely. Would I rather they show it in different ways? Sure, but I'm not them, so I can't do that for them. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I actually was going to take it in a little bit of a different direction. We talked about culture earlier, and I don't blame Jair Brown at all. I think Charvarius Ward realized that he's a veteran, and that's why he deleted it. I mean, if he really stood by what he said or thought that was a good decision, he would have kept the tweet up. So I like that he deleted it. I understand they're competitive. I understand that they just went through a heartbreaking loss. The last thing they want to see is Sauce Gardner or whoever around the league talking their trash. But to me, this is a culture that the 49ers do have. And it's led by guys like Deebo Samuel, who famously went at the Eagles and celebrated their losses last year in the Super Bowl. So to expect that people aren't going to celebrate your demise, I think is a little bit arrogant. And when I look at that culture and I see that Jair Brown is a rookie and is kind of just jumping in on that culture, to me, it's a little frustrating, the timing of it, doing it hours after the Super Bowl. It's like, man, this team is so worried about credit and getting credit from people and being told that they're great from people. This isn't just a Jair Brown thing. This is a culture thing. And we've seen it all year, yet they don't cash in. They continuously think they're the best team. They continuously think that they should have won Super Bowls. They shouldn't have come up short. They were better than the team that they lost to. They make that known every single year. And I just think that it's kind of fair that other people are coming at you now and calling your bluff and like, listen, you've been running your mouth year after year after year. People are going to take exception to that and they're going to respond. And I think sometimes it's better to just let it be, let people talk. And then you're going to play the Jets next year, right? Here's what I would have liked to happen. Keep that, bookmark that, sit on that. And then after you beat the Jets, retweet it. Like that's the ultimate get back. They're on the schedule next year. Again, I'm not telling these guys how to handle their emotions. You guys are professionals, do what you want. I'm also not crushing them as individuals for it. To me, though, this is the culture that this team thrives in. And you kind of this is the bed that you made. You have to lay in it every once in a while. And regardless of whether it was maybe Jair Brown wasn't the talker all year, but guess what? Deebo Samuel did do the talking for your team. And he wrote checks that the team has to cash now. And that's just the way that it is.
I mean, I think it's kind of weak that players from teams that aren't even playing are the ones that are doing the trash talking.
But didn't the 49ers do the same thing last year? They literally were like, told you, Ayuk, the Chiefs are gonna blow out the Eagles.
Sure.
Debo, Bradbury's trash. And as soon as they lost, they were celebrating it as if they had won the game. They weren't in the game. So what were you celebrating for?
Sure. Like I said, I think that ultimately that's just who they are as far as competitors. Like they don't like the Eagles don't like them. Right. So Fletcher Cox flexing. I don't have a problem with that. I mean, Sauce Gardner, maybe, I don't know where that came from. They haven't even played, so I don't know where that's coming from. But I mean, I push back on the fact that that this team doesn't understand what they need to be doing. I mean, there was, I think, like Fred Warner. I remember when in the Detroit game, like Dre Greenlaw was like, "Oh man, we got," in Fred Warner's like, "Nah, game's not over yet." Kind of like, so I think that there's a certain few personalities on the team that do that. Debo obviously is a big one. You said Ayuk. I don't think Ayuk does it as much. Demo, Charvarius Ward. I don't necessarily know if it's like the whole team or if that should be like the team's culture thing. And yeah, I mean, if you think that Kyle Shanahan should reel that in, and maybe, but ultimately I think it comes from a few players that I think it's just the times have changed, man. The culture has changed. And, with social media being as big as it is, I just think that is kind of what it is. Like there's other, like Demo, sometimes there's certain things that happen in the locker room too, where they're like recording and all this kind of stuff. Other teams don't necessarily do that. I think that's just the generation now, man.
Yeah, for sure. Like I said, I don't want to kill the individual players. To me, you know how I am, Sunil. I really, really look at like the leadership side of things, and I really try to analyze that aspect of it, because that's what I do in my normal work. Is I've always led people, and I've made a lot of mistakes as a leader, and I've learned from those. And so I've always analyzed the leadership aspect when it comes to Kyle. and how the team responds to certain things and try to figure out what's going on. And this to me is just one of those culture things. And I think that Kyle, he's not on social media by any means, or at least that we know of. He's probably got a burner because he was the one that was telling some players about some things going on social media that they didn't even know about. But he definitely is a part of that. I mean, that the team does take on the personality of their coaches a lot of the time. And Kyle Shanahan does have arrogance to him for sure. And I think the team.
You call it arrogance, I call it swagger.
Okay. Arrogance, swagger, whatever.
It's arrogance
the team
if you're not winning, though. So.
For sure. The team definitely does feed off that. I mean, that's who they are as well, for better or for worse. So, all right. Mark Soto says, how many years of falling short does Kyle deserve? Harbaugh got 4. We don't hang NFC championships or division banners. Jed York. I don't know. I don't know the answer to that question. I mean, I will say this. Here's what I do know the answer to. I knew last year when they lost the NFC championship, I got a similar question and a DM, like, how many years? And I said, you saw what Marvin Lewis got when he was in Cincinnati, right?
Mm-hmm.
Expect that plus some for Kyle. I think this leash is very long. And hearing Jed York come out this last week and say that if the 49ers had lost in the NFC championship to the Detroit Lions, he would have considered that a successful season. I don't think that he is holding the team to the standards that you guys as a fan base would prefer. So I really look at it and I say, okay, you might be frustrated with Kyle, and I think that's deservedly so. But when we talk about leadership, Sunil, you have to go up as far as you can. Jed York is setting the tone for the whole franchise and what he's going to allow and what he's not going to allow. And what he's willing to allow and what he deems a successful season does not necessarily align with what we deem as a successful season. And so for that reason, I don't know how long he deserves. I think that comes down to our individual interpretation. I will tell you, Jed York clearly thinks that he deserves a lifetime here if that's what he wants. So Real OBJ says, keep Jawan, trade Debo. Will D19 have suitors? I'm sure he will. The problem is that he carries a big cap hit and that he is really hard to trade before the draft. So I don't know. Dave says, I had no issues with the refs. 0 is favored in the Super Bowl. Or O is favored. Oh, offense. Yeah. No, it is. You're right. Brother Bob says, Dave Barclay is right. Luckily, we have Kyle, though. God. Brother Bob says, refs have nothing to do with it. Kyle play calls. Lucky us. Danny, y'all? No one wants to admit the obvious. Crocker made a good point. The elite quarterback transcends all mistakes. No Super Bowl with Purdy. He ain't got it. All right. I wasn't going to go there. I was going to try to get through more of these super chats, but this is a great transition to the Brock Purdy conversation. So we'll start the Brock Purdy conversation with just simply this, Sunil. How do you feel about Brock Purdy's performance last night and also his performance overall in the playoffs?
I see a lot of potential in a guy that can be the guy. I mean, I also have to put into perspective, it's his second year. He's coming off of an injury. And I think he has some intangibles that are elite. And especially paired with Kyle Shanahan, I think there's a lot that can be done there. And I think he's only going to get better. I love, you talk about leadership. I love the way he answers questions. I love his demeanor when he's winning or, when he's losing, as far as it seems like he has his mind in the right place. And, I expect him to be even better next season. As far as his play in the playoffs, I don't think this team gets as far as they did without his ability to kind of turn on a dime and turn it on, when it's not going well for him at certain portions of the game. And I think he makes really, really good plays with his legs. And, I think he got better and better with decision making as the playoffs went on. And ultimately, I don't think that Obviously he's not as good as Patrick Mahomes, but I would say for a majority of that game, Purdy was playing better than Mahomes. But obviously, when crunch time came down to it, Mahomes made better plays. He ended up executing, and unfortunately, when when Mahomes' offensive line was breaking down, Mahomes was able to make the plays late. Fortunately, Purdy wasn't able to make the play. When he needed to, when his offensive line broke down. And I think ultimately that's what ended up, why the Chiefs won and the 49ers didn't. But to me, I'm rocking with Brock Purdy. I think he has shown enough to continue to continue to put your faith in him and allow him to get even better. And like you said, you start judging a quarterback based off of their third year. Next year is going to be his third year. So we get to see exactly what he is. And luckily, 49ers don't have to make a decision on him yet. So we get his full third year to see if the trajectory we've seen him on gets even better.
Yeah, I have. If you just look at raw statistics in Brock Purdy during the regular season, he certainly took a major backstep in the playoffs. But when I look at the games and what he was able to do in crunch time, I talked about this before the Super Bowl. I love the way that he played. I love the way that he came through in clutch moments. And I thought that showed a lot of growth on his part. As far as the Super Bowl went, I think it all comes down to expectations. The last comment said that Brock ain't it. We'll find that out, I think, over time. People know my stance. I don't believe that Brock is ever going to be that franchise quarterback either. But I'm not going to act as if he can't get there. And I'm going to give him next year before I fully kind of have a decision on who I think Brock Purdy is and if he's worth paying or not. That being said, my expectation of Brock Purdy is that of a player who is in his second year, his first full year starting, coming off of an injury. My expectation of Brock Purdy is not that he's an elite quarterback. And based off of my expectations, he met all of the expectations I could have looked for in that Super Bowl. He played, in my opinion, to what he is today, to the best of his ability. He is not the reason that the 49ers lost. Okay. Now, Patrick Mahomes is great, and great quarterbacks do transcend, and that's why you need an elite quarterback. And I've broken down the stats many times of who wins Super Bowls and who does not. Either elite quarterbacks win Super Bowls when they're paid, or quarterbacks who are very inexpensive and not elite win Super Bowls. There is no in between. There is no guys that are very good getting paid a lot of money winning Super Bowls. It hasn't happened yet, and it's probably not ever going to happen. Brock Purdy right now meets one of the two criteria to win a Super Bowl, and that's what's heartbreaking about last night, is that he meets the criteria of inexpensive quarterback. And inexpensive quarterback playing at his level was good enough to win the Super Bowl. Unfortunately, it didn't get done. My concern is that was their best chance. It's going to be extremely difficult to make it back again next year. And I don't know that he'll ever have the opportunity again. And I do worry that if they don't make it next year, and I have my doubts in this moment, that paying him basically relegates your franchise to not making it back with him at the helm. But we'll see. We'll see how that plays out. I think Brock had a very good season. I think Brock exceeded all expectations of who people thought he was going to be coming out of the draft. I think Brock is a good quarterback. I think anybody who doesn't think that he deserves to be a starting quarterback in this league or hasn't done things that Jimmy Garoppolo clearly has not done in this offense maybe are being very biased or don't like Brock Purdy or haven't watched enough, whatever the case. I think that he's proven himself to be a starter, be better than Jimmy, and gave this team an opportunity to win a Super Bowl. Unfortunately, they came up short, but I have zero issues with how Brock Purdy played. Do I still question, can he be the franchise guy? Is he worth giving a lot of money to? Yes, definitely. No, my mind has not changed based off of this season. However, do I question whether he can get better or we're going to get the best of Brock Purdy No, because I believe in Brock Purdy and his mentality, and I think he's going to get the most out of who he is physically. I just don't know if who he is physically is enough to ultimately be that guy long term, but we'll see. We will see. Let's see. All right. I think I might have gotten this one. Yeah. All right.
Yeah,
That
you
was the
just
one that led to our topic about Brock Purdy. Brian says O-line needs to be addressed. They lost the game. For sure. Dave Barclay says Mason, Mitchell, McCaffrey run by committee. They're definitely going to have to run the ball a lot more with those other guys next year. You can't do with CMC what you did this year and get away with it. I don't believe. Brother Bob says, Dave, we can't use all our running backs. Kyle's rule. Sorry. Dave says, BB is Brother Bob, the man, the myth, the legend. Oh, okay. I said Bill Belichick earlier. Mike drops with Monza. What's up, man? It says, has the 49ers benefited from a weak NFC on this run? Absolutely. And I think that's what makes this season harder is that we know that teams are getting better and they're going to close that gap very, very quickly. Everything lined up for the 49ers to win the Super Bowl. I think not only was the NFC the weakest it's been in a long time, Kansas City was weaker than they've been. I personally don't think top to bottom they were as good of a team as the Ravens were. I was kind of happy to play the Kansas City Chiefs. I thought they were gettable and beatable, and the game just didn't go their way. Patrick Mahomes is the boogeyman. I mean, what are you going to do? Wolf Life says, guys, why us? I'm deflated at this point. Man, I feel it. You guys have been my therapy. I'm just being real. Cryptic says, people don't realize how spoiled we are. We are not losing in the wild card or divisional. We are losing in games that decide if we have a chance to get number 6. Can't take that for granted. Sure. I agree with that. I just think that we're all ready to get over the hump, and it's frustrating when they don't. Because we also know how hard it is to get there, and when you get there and you squander it, it sucks. Brother Bob says, Dave, you're the real MVP. Trust you more than I do, Kyle. Dave says, how about demote Kyle? GTC Real says, why was Burford in on the overtime and 3rd and 4 before the field goal? Wasn't Feliciano hurt? He got hurt, right? Am I mistaken?
Feliciano got injured.
Yeah,
he got injured.
he looked like he couldn't
Like
even
ribs
move
or
his shoulder or arm or something. Yeah, he was in a lot of pain. Dave says, if I'm MVP, you're the GM, BB. All right, let's do this real quick, Sunil. Let's get to our last topic. I don't want to hold you to read all these super chats. I'll give you the opportunity to dip out after this.
I'm enjoying the little bromance between Brother Bob and Dave. Like, they're just going back and forth, sending each other little love notes. It's pretty cute.
No, I just want to respect your time because I always ask for an hour and we're already at an hour 20 and most of that is super chat. So let's do the last topic. We'll get through that. If you have to go, totally fine. I'll stick by and I'll get through the super chats and kind of finish up with these guys. All right. Sound good?
Yep.
All right. Question is, run it back. Now, this goes back to 19 where they felt like they were the best team. They kind of ran it back. We've seen this tour before. We know this team is very close to Neil, but as I just talked about in the comment with Mike Drops with Monza, a lot of things were favorable this year that I don't know are going to be favorable. Should the 49ers start thinking about retooling now? Not necessarily a full rebuild, right? They're not to that point, but a retool where you get rid of guys like Kittle or Debo or Armstead. You start thinking about it and at least shopping them and retool on the fly and try to retool through that? Or do you say, hey, this team was close. Let's run it back. Obviously, with the fact that you're going to have some draft picks, you got to draft some O linemen, you got to improve there, whether through free agency or the draft, what have you, and try to make another run at this. What do you think the 49ers strategy should be?
Yeah, I mean, I don't think, when you say run it back, should the same 53-man roster be the one that
No, and that's not possible. I mean, that can't happen.
Yeah. I mean, I don't think I think the McKivitz project needs to be removed. I mean, it's great that it seems like Trent Williams is down to play at least another year, if not 2 years, which buys you some
Yeah.
time. So I think definitely with their first round pick, they have to go out and get the best player available that could get you that right tackle, solidified, whether that be through the draft, ideally, rather than trying to do it through free agency. I think that they're going to need some depth at linebacker now because Greenlaw probably won't come back exactly the way Greenlaw was. And I think Oren Burks, we saw he's not the solution there. I don't think he's going to get that significantly better that he could just jump in. And I think ultimately another corner, another safety. So they need like significant upgrades, I think, at certain positions. So to me, yeah, you gotta make some moves. I think you go all in on this year, whatever that means, all in, and you go out and make some splash moves. The core is there, right? I don't think you get rid of necessarily. People are saying trade Debo. I don't see that as a route that they should go. I think you keep the weapons as is. You do your best to make some splash moves, whether it be an edge rusher, definitely retool along that offensive line, and then bring in I think another borderline star, whether it be at corner, edge rusher, or safety, and really get yourself to the roster that potentially could get you over the hump. Because to me, I'm not giving up on it. I don't think like, hey, this needs to be a start from scratch type thing, like you mentioned. It doesn't need to be that, but you can't quote unquote run it back either.
Yeah, most certainly. I guess when I say run it back, I mean exactly that. Like people are talking about getting rid of Debo, Kittle, what have you. Here's what I'll say. I personally would prefer to kind of go the retool route, but it's not possible. Not the way these contracts are constructed, in my opinion. And I'll break it down a little bit here in a second. But for me, I think the great teams and the great coaches find a way to move on from players maybe a year early rather than a year late. And seeing Debo Samuel get hurt once again in the Super Bowl and be compromised. He had 11 targets. He could not get open. He was blanketed. Kittle, shoot, man. I mean, other than seeing his long hair in the huddle, I couldn't have told you he was in that game. Now, obviously, when we go back watch all 22, maybe he was blocking and helping out there, what have you. But I was shocked by that. I really thought that George Kittle was set up to have a big game with the corners that the Chiefs had, knowing that he really wanted that ring. He wanted to get back to this point. I just thought that Kittle was going to play great. And I don't know schematically if it just wasn't set up for him yet, or if Brock didn't see him. I don't know. But one thing I do know is he didn't show up. And he's now on the other side of 30, I believe. So for me, those guys, the brand that they play, I would love to move on from them and get draft picks. The 49ers aren't able to do that. And so they don't have a choice but to go all in, as you said, this year. When you look at Debo Samuel, for example, if you want to trade him for draft picks, you're going to take a $21.7 million cap hit to do so. You're only going to save about $6.8 million. Now, you can get rid of him after June 1st, but that means you're not getting draft picks. You're getting players. That's really hard to do. And you're only going to take about a $6.6 million cap hit. George Kittle, if you trade him after June 1st, you're going to take about an $8 million cap hit. But if you trade him prior to June 1st, you're going to take a $19 million cap hit. The 49ers aren't in a position to get rid of these guys. This, for better or for worse, this is the team, essentially, the core that they are going to have. You just have to hope that they can hit on these picks, and these picks can make a significant difference early, much like we've seen teams like Kansas City's young picks make a big difference. So for me, what I would do versus what is actually possible are two different things. But these contracts and these players are structured in a way that it just is what it is. This is what we're looking at. We're going to have essentially a run it back year with some minor tweaks. The core is the core. and it's either good enough or it's not. I have a hard time believing it's good enough after this year, but for me, this is what it is, guys. Like this is what we're looking at. Debo ain't going nowhere. Kittle isn't going nowhere. Armstead's not going anywhere. All of them are in the same situation cap-wise. I don't see the 49ers moving on from any of them. So this is the team you're looking at. Whether you like it or not, this is where we're at. So Neil, do you want to stick around for the super chats or do you want to take off?
Absolutely, man. I'm good.
Okay.
I'm good.
All right, there's 32 of these things. So are you sure? If at any time you need to raise your hand and say, I got to go, you're good. Brother Bob says, Dave, can you believe Sunil, a.k.a. Kyle's pimp? Here we go. All right. Dave says, pushing him, isn't he? Fire Kyle. Dave says, Kyle chose 9 of 10 passes to start the third. Dumb. Dave says Kyle had to call zone in overtime. How many examples? Sunday. I don't know.
It's probably me, Sunil.
Oh, Sunil.
Kyle had to call zone in OT.
I think that he is asking how many examples do you want as to what he could have done better. I think you got to remember these were a while ago. I'm trying to remember what you said a while ago. So, Brother Bob says, KP, answer, how many more years? 13? Or does he need to change the team in order to win a Super Bowl? So does Kyle need to change teams to win a Super Bowl, or do we need to give him 13 years is what he's saying?
I don't think it's going to take 13 years. I wouldn't wait 13 years.
13 years. We're at 7. We are at 7. We'll see. Dave says, how much do we need to show? You're a homer now. Man, they really don't like your Kyle Shanahan stance. Brother Bob says, Dave, bingo, homer alert. We're waiting on 13 more years. Jiminy Christmas, you guys. Dave says, 100% BB, you should be the coach. Sunil would be mad. Brother Bob says, Dave, yeah, my culture would be a winning Super Bowls. No excuses. Dave says, guaranteed BB, real, recognize real. You guys are freaking hilarious. Dave says, I do think Greenlaw would have changed the game. Yeah, certainly. I mean, he's a tone setter, man. He's our tone setter. And we saw when he missed a game earlier this year what it looked like. We saw when he played and he wasn't fully healthy what it looked like. Losing him was heartbreaking for this team. I agree. Shady Luke says, Jesse, serious question. Y'all lost to the Browns, Cincy, Chiefs, and the Ravens, top dogs in the AFC. I don't see anybody talking about all the L's. No, I agree with you, man. I talked about it all year. I talked about how the NFC was easier. And luckily for the 49ers that they didn't have to go through the AFC because I don't think they would have made it out of the AFC. And the silver lining was they only had to beat one of those teams and they had to do it in the Super Bowl. And unfortunately, the team that they met, they weren't able to beat them. You're right. I mean, they have to beat a team in the AFC, and the AFC is extremely tough. But I will also say the NFC is going to be a lot tougher next year as well, including their own division. Dave Barclay says Shady Luke is right too. He says, yes, keep Jawan, trade Debo. I just laid it out, guys. I don't think it's happening. Maybe Jawan can come back. We'll see. But yeah, the trading Debo is not going to happen. Brother Bob says, yep, Dave, Shady Luke is right. KP won't answer. Let's see. Damn, Keith, I just closed out of yours. I made the same mistake. I apologize. Put it in the regular chat. I'll grab it. Dazza says, we have to make a decision on Brock Purdy next year. Is he really worth 40 plus million? Next year. We don't have to make the decision this year. So let's give him next year. Keith, this is your second one. Put your first one in and I'll go back and get it. You don't have to super chat it. He says, luckily, we don't have to make a decision on Purdy right now. For a second-year quarterback, we have a lot of positives. He won't be in rehab this summer, and he can work. I agree with that. Dave says, Purdy played well enough, still won't buy a 13 jersey. All right, that's up to you. Mike Drops with Monster says, I don't need next year. His physical limitations are a problem. Listen, that's why I said I don't think he'll ever be elite, but we will see. What's up, Brad? He says, go Lions. We haven't talked I know you were gutted after your loss to us. I'm sure that you know that I was gutted after our loss. You know exactly what it feels like, man. So, yeah, we'll see. I'm curious to see how your Lions bounce back next year. Speaking of your Lions, I'm very curious to see what that looks like next year. Jay Dizzy says, is it better being a Jets fan, never making the playoffs, or a 49ers fan, always losing in the NFC Championship or the Super Bowl? Sounds like some prefer the latter here. I will say it's a lot more heartbreaking losing in the playoffs, but I would rather lose in the playoffs. I know it sucks, but it's kind of fun. Like the ride lasting as long as it did is fun, but it's easier when your team doesn't even make the playoffs and you can just kind of watch the playoffs with no pressure. So I don't know, man. Both kind of suck. Basically, what you're asking is, when you die, do you want to die of a terminal illness, or would you rather die in a car crash? It's like, I don't know, man. Both suck. I don't know what to tell you. Dave says they are our love notes. Sunil is jealous. Brother Bob says he's definitely jealous. He wants it all for Kyle. That's his love or something. Dave Barclay says BB and I are faithful to the team, not the coach. And he says for sure, Kyle is his main squeeze. It is Valentine's, guys. I can see you guys are like passing the little heart-shaped candies to each other in the chat. Jordan says this will be Brock's first real offseason, so we'll learn a lot about Brock in year 3. Need some dogs on the right side of the O-line. I agree with that. And Dave says his bottom bish. All right. Cryptic says, who do you think is getting better in the NFC? Do the Niners get a Super Bowl slump? Do the Eagles rebound? I think the Niners have a top quarterback in the NFC and can repeat the number 1 seed. Well, I look at Seattle's roster, and I was wrong. I talked about their roster being very good this year or going into the season. I don't necessarily think I was wrong about the roster, but I was wrong about them being better. Their coaching staff was awful. I've said it many times, they look like a 1960s coach team. That is going to change. They got themselves an elite defensive play caller in McDonald, who gave the 49ers fits, gave a lot of teams fits, had the number 1 defense. There's a lot of talent on that defense. They're going to be a lot better. The Rams are going to be better. They have $40 million in cap space, and they kind of came on strong this year. So they're going to be better. The division's going to be better. The Packers will be better. The Lions, I don't know. We'll see. I think they have a chance to get better. They're definitely younger. We'll see if they're able to get better. I don't know about the Eagles. The Eagles, Dallas, I don't necessarily know that they're in the mix, but I think some of those other teams are definitely in the mix. And the Bucks, another one, they'll be a lot better. They had about $50 million in dead cap space this year that they had to work around. So they'll have more money to spend. So, yeah, I think the NFC is just going to be better as a whole. It's going to be a lot tougher. Can the 49ers get the number 1 seed again? Sure, they can. They still are going to have an upper echelon roster. The Super Bowl hangover is a real thing, too. So I'm not sure if that will happen. Shady Luke says, as good as Bosa is, for him to lose contain on the 4th down read option is bonkers. Debo's paid too much. Bigger and faster Percy Harvin without the route running skills as a true wide receiver. Yeah, he has paid a lot of money, man. Brother Bob says, Dave, LMAO at bottom bish. I'm dead. You're right, though. Okay. Keith Murphy says, retool after 2025. Can't extend Debo again. Gotta give Spags and the defense credit. Yeah, I mean, I think after 2025, we're going full rebuild. I don't think that's a retool, but we'll see. Keith Murphy says, what's going to happen to Juwan? He's going to be tough to bring back. Yeah. Do you want him back, though, right? It's just a matter of like, what's he going to get paid? You know what I mean?
Yeah. And I mean, he had a hell of a Super Bowl. I think if, it ended up winning, he might have been MVP, to be honest.
Yeah. Oh, he would have won. I put it down. I said, who had Juwan Jennings as their Super Bowl MVP? Cash that ticket now. Unfortunately, they lost, so that didn't happen. But yeah, anyways, Jay Dizzy says Dave Barclays thinks he can coach the 49ers better right now than Kyle. Fire Kyle and hire Dave Barclay. Dave says Emma is right. How many free agents? There's a lot of free agents. In fact, here, let me go through the list here. I'm not going to give you every single name, but I will give you
I think there's
portion.
like 6.
No, we got a lot. Hold on. I had it pulled up earlier, and it looks like free agency. Here we go. Hopefully this pulls it up. All right, here we go. They got a lot of names on here. Randy Gregory, Chase Young, Sam Darnold, Javon Kinlaw, Tayshaun Gibson, Sebastian Joseph Day, Oren Burks, Cleveland Farrell, John Feliciano, Kevin Givens, Ray McLeod, Demetrius Flanagan Foles, Ross Dwelly, Brandon Allen, Chris Conley, Logan Ryan, Matt Pryor, Jawan Jennings, Ben Barch, Charlie Warner, Taylor Hawkins. Out of those guys, I would say like maybe 2 are a priority. So some of them are good depth pieces, but those are the free agents. Jay Dizzy says Dave Barclays and BB equal Grant Goldburner accounts. He has 2 of them, though. That's kind of wild. Andy's talking to himself like split personalities. I don't know about that. Dave says, I'll take the job legitimately. Yaz says Purdy is not Mahomes, but no one is. I agree with that. Completely agree with that. Dave Barclay says, Jay Dizzy, I'm 41, was wearing red and gold before I knew what ball was. I lived near Sierra College and was beat daily as a kid. I went and watched the Niners as often as possible. I'm a diehard from way BK. Oh, way back. Way back, yeah. Brother Bob says KP is not 13 more. It's not. So not 13 more years for Kyle. How long do you give him? Man, he really wants an answer on this. The amount of years, set years you want to give him.
When's his contract ended? Like 3 more years?
Oh no, he's got like 6 more years, I think, at this point, or 5 more years. They extended him big time.
I'll fire him on his first losing season. Like,
Okay,
I mean, if the
fair.
team is still contending for Super Bowls, I'm not firing him. But like, if they miss the playoffs, then yeah. But as long as they're competing for a Super Bowl, I think that you give him the shot.
I think that's fair. Jay Dizzy says, Dave Barclay, since you're such a genius in recognizing true coaching talent, who are you firing right now to replace Kyle Shanahan to win a Super Bowl in 2024? Go. All right. Shady Luke says, cryptic. Other fans have no idea just how bad the Eagles scheme was down the stretch. It was awful. No hot routes, no answers for blitzes, no crossing routes. Oh, and by the way, you guys always ran out of shotgun with a running back right next to the quarterback, which means you really can't run play action, and you really can only either run up the middle or to the opposite side of where the running back is. Schematically, it was awful in Philly. Dave Barclay says, have to see what happens in the offseason. But I'm coaching. So he's saying it doesn't matter. He's the coach. Randall says, glad folks like Spags say they were impressed with Purdy after the Super Bowl, comparing him to Breeze. Guess some respected minds think he may be kind of elite. Yeah, we'll see. I also think that players and coaches generally say nice things about players and coaches when they're mic'd up after a Super Bowl. Dave Barclay says, keep Kyle and Wilkes under me for 1 year. See their true flaws and strengths. I was in military and now a contractor. He's saying he's a better leader. I like it. Nebu says, I really depends on how we do in this draft. Yeah, this draft's going to be huge, man. They're going to need some players out of it that contribute. Cryptic says, you are right about free agency. How can we win without Darnold? Yeah, it says signing BA is number 1 priority. Yeah, but he technically is under contract this year. Certainly, I would like to get it done. But sometimes the 49ers wait, so we'll see. Jay Dizzy says, Andy Reid got fired after 8-8 and 4-12 season. If that happens to Kyle, he gets fired. Then everyone is happy. Let's hope for 4-12 next year. I don't hope for 4-12. Skit says 10-6 next year, calling it now, division round loss. You mean 10-7. 17 game schedule. Man, Oh, coach coming in. He says, fire Kyle if we can get Ben Johnson. So that's his only way that he's firing Kyle. All right, y'all. Listen, that was a great stream. Appreciate you. We were well over 400 strong. Sunil, thank you for giving us an hour and 40 minutes and not bailing, even though I gave you the out. I know that the chat was after you tonight. You definitely took it in stride. Wouldn't expect anything less from you. Class act, my boy Sunil. Y'all, I will be back tomorrow in some capacity or another for sure with Ryan in the morning or afternoon, depending on where you reside. And then we'll see about at night. And also be prepared for open mic nights coming back Wednesday, 10 p.m. Eastern. We'll see you then. It'll be your chance to get things off your chest. So be ready. Shady Luke says no coaches should leave Niners fans. All right, fair enough. All right, y'all. Stay blessed. Peace.